Joining me now, former Obama White House Deputy National Security Advisor and MSNBC political contributor Ben Rhodes. Welcome back, Ben. It's good to see you. So let's talk about the expectations for Monday. You have U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who said only a conversation between Trump and China's Xi Jinping could solve the differences. So how much do these talks matter? And does China have a fundamental advantage in this trade war?
The talks always matter at the leader level with the Chinese because Xi Jinping is the ultimate decision maker in China. That's normal. These matter even more because on the U.S. side, there are multiple policies happening at once. You've got people like Scott Bessent, who clearly wants to kind of calm the markets down, clearly wants to kind of unwind the trade war that his boss started. But then you've got all kinds of Trump advisors who are spoiling for a fight, who want to escalate things. And so I think what Xi Jinping wants to do, and I think he's been quite firm with Trump, and Trump seems to have a lot of affection for Xi Jinping as a strongman. Xi Jinping wants to say, look, let's just calm this down. You need to rein in your more escalatory, if not crazy, advisors. I also think Xi Jinping, to your question, Alex, is holding a lot of cards here because in addition to the fact that the global markets are being disrupted and that led to a lot of Trump supporters putting pressure on him to unwind these tariffs, China has restricted the export of what are called rare earth materials that they have a massive global monopoly on to the U.S. And U.S. manufacturing can't really work without these inputs from the Chinese. So I think Trump didn't, he shot before he aimed in this trade war. China has a lot of leverage here, and they're trying to use it to just turn the dial back down.
Okay, but good to know. These talks on Monday, they're important. We'll be watching that closely. Let's go on to Iran now, Ben, because the Trump administration has proposed an interim arrangement allowing Iran to continue enriching uranium while a plan is being worked out to block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon. This is according to two sources with knowledge of the matter, as well as two foreign diplomats. Under this proposal, the U.S. will assist building uranium enrichment facilities managed by a consortium of Arab nations, which will provide nuclear fuel to Iran for non-nuclear purposes only. You, Ben, helped craft the Obama administration's Iran deal, which Trump tore up. Is this a viable compromise, and does it buy more time for diplomacy, perhaps?
Yeah, it buys time for diplomacy. Clearly, the Trump people want a deal. They want this kind of off their plate. They don't want the risk of a nuclear-armed Iran or the risk of an Israeli strike on Iran that could start a much wider regional war. The irony of all this, Alex, of course, is that we had a nuclear deal in place. Trump pulled out of it because it was Obama's deal. What the Iranians want is they want to maintain some kind of domestic nuclear program, some kind of domestic enrichment capacity. That means there are centrifuges spinning inside of Iran that are enriching uranium for nuclear purposes. If they can have that capability, you can have a deal. That's what essentially happened in the Obama years. They shipped all their fuel out. They took out a bunch of those centrifuges and put them under storage. Their inspections. If the Trump people can get comfortable with the Iranians having some minimal capability, not for weapons purposes, for medical purposes, other energy purposes, then I think you can get a deal. This is kind of a bridge, and they want to test whether the Iranians will let go of a program entirely if they can kind of get fuel from somewhere else. I don't know that the Iranians will agree to that, which is partially why this is being proposed as an interim step. The Trump people have to come to terms with the fact that their own hardliners are not going to get what they want from the Iranians and get a deal, because Iran is not going to agree to having no nuclear program. So once again, they're kind of buying time for their own internal policy contradictions here. What they've said they want is not what they're going to be able to get, but they, I think, are trying to get to the place where they can say yes to the Iranians.
And you have Vladimir Putin, who told President Trump on their phone call this week he's interested in participating in the Iran negotiations. He says he could help bring the deal to a quick close. Moscow certainly has ties, close ones, with Tehran. Would Putin help negotiations, or would he just complicate matters further?
I mean, he was obviously involved in the last Iran deal, involved Russia and China and the Europeans. And they could be helpful on certain things, like if the Iranians are shipping their nuclear fuel out of the country, which is what they did in the last deal, that you want that fuel out so they don't have fuel to build a bomb. Russia could help ship that fuel out, or Russia could take that onto their soil. They could help in that kind of way. But the reality here, frankly, Alex, is I think Putin is trying to appeal to Trump, leader to leader, look at the kind of ways in which we can cooperate. If you just kind of look the other way, and let me do what I'm doing in Ukraine, or if you continue to pressure the Ukrainians to make all the concessions that I want in terms of territory, in terms of their future relationship with the United States. So I don't think the price that, like, what Putin could deliver in this deal is worth it. But Trump, I think, is susceptible to that kind of appeal from Putin. He should be focused on ending the war in Ukraine by putting some pressure on Putin instead of trying to build some larger cooperative agenda. He doesn't need to do that to conclude an Iran deal.
Ben, speaking of that Putin phone call, after it, the White House said an immediate peace deal with Russia and Ukraine isn't going to happen. Trump later compared the two countries to two young children who hate each other and said it might be better to let them fight for a while before pulling them apart. This is after Trump's increasing frustration with Putin on this topic, suggesting that he might pressure him into ending the war. Does the ambivalence of Trump's comment suggest he's not willing to punish Putin? I mean, does he not fundamentally understand Putin's obsession to conquer Ukraine?
He clearly either doesn't understand or doesn't care, Alex. And his description is kind of pointless. He keeps trying to talk about Russia and Ukraine, like he would talk about political adversaries at a campaign rally. This is the real world in which there's a war going on that has, killed or wounded hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people and imperils Ukraine's survival and European security. And the reality is the only person that Trump has meaningfully pressured for the last few months is President Zelensky. He's the one that has had to make concessions to Trump. He's the one that agreed to a 30-day ceasefire, which Putin would not agree to. He's the one who agreed to fly to Istanbul to meet with Putin, which Putin would not do. He's the one who's had to worry about whether the U.S. is going to cut off the support that his nation depends upon. And so, of course, during that period, we saw Russia escalate the war. Before the Ukrainians did that operation in Russia, you saw the largest drone attacks from Russia. You saw missile strikes on Kyiv. You saw the Russians escalate. All Trump's diplomacy has done thus far is actually escalate the war and empower Russia. And so now for him to say, maybe I'm going to walk away, well, if he walks away without providing significant additional military support to Ukraine, walking away is a gift to Vladimir Putin. So for whatever reason, he still continues to basically do exactly what Vladimir Putin would want a U.S. president to be doing.
Always excellent insights, Ben Rhodes. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you.